So welcome to the Academic Leaders Series. This is a panel on tools for inclusive leadership. We have a really exciting panel. It includes Provost Fitzgerald, Angela Fowler, NDSU's Academic Personnel Coordinator, Dr. William Nganje, Chair of the Department of Agribusiness and Applied Economics, Dr. Chris Ray, Head of the School of Education, and Dr. Christina Weber, Chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I prepared a list of questions that cover different facets of inclusive leadership that I'll be asking the panelists, but we'll also hold time at the end of the discussion for you to ask your own questions. If you have a question before that time, you're also welcome to put it in the chat and I'll try and share it with the group as well. So with that, panelists, the first question is for all of you. How does a leader create an inclusive, positive atmosphere? Your opinions on that. How about we start with Provost Fitzgerald, please.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Jess, and thanks to all of you for coming today. In terms of helping to build an inclusive environment, I think it's really important for leadership to try to model inclusive behaviors and to talk about and try to show how important that kind of an environment is. And you know, when I read the statement about a positive atmosphere, I'm going to be very simplistic in giving you this example, but it's absolutely true. When my children were young, they were at the Center for Child Development here on campus, and I was in a terrible funk one morning, as grouchy as can be, and not a very nice person that morning. And so we're driving to school, and I don't know if you're familiar with Penny and Pals. It is a local singing group, and they perform for children, and the song that came on in our car was Choose Your Mood. And it really struck a chord with me that, you know, I think it is important for leadership to be positive and to try to be motivating, and again, to create this environment of inclusion and listening. And please, when I say to be positive, I don't mean don't state your concerns or talk about challenging issues. Those are all very important too, but, you know, don't be a curmudgeon either. So I'll stop talking now and let someone else.
We totally relate to that. We can, you know, just keep going in the alphabetical order. Angela, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'd reiterate what Margaret said as far as that modeling, that respectful behavior as well, and being supportive, showing that support to all of our employees. I think one thing that we can do to support excellence in our departments is also allowing our employees, I should say, going beyond that, just allowing our employees to partake in various things on campus, whether it's training such as the Safe Zone, Community of Respect, various committees that might be on campus, but going beyond just that, allowing them, but also in the encouraging of that. So making that extra step to encourage our employees to partake in those extra things that might take them away from their desk or activities for a period of time, but letting them get that other you know, information and being able to participate in those things on our campus. And as well as, you know, when you don't have those positive moments of choosing that good mood and we have those maybe negative times, and we might hear things or witness behaviors in our departments, to address them, you know, right away, and to, you know, just check in with our employees to make sure, one, that they're okay, but also then having those conversations that might be those hard conversations about what that appropriate behavior is, and not just kind of letting it go and I'll deal with it next week type of thing.
Thank you. William?
Yeah, so thanks again for organizing this panel, and I'm glad to be here. So I'll start with the inclusive part of the question. Our department, for example, when I came in as chair, I said everything must be run as a democratic process. We have committees, and the committees brainstorm on decision. And those committees, we want to make sure that everybody is included in those committees, whether it's a mix of female, male, junior faculty. I always like to have junior faculty, those with associate and full professors in committees. so that it is a complete mix. But every decision, we either form an ad hoc committee if it's a big issue, send it to the committee, they brainstorm on it, bring it to faculty, and the faculty vote on it. So I avoid kind of trying to make single-handed decision as a chair, because I want everybody to be heard and everybody to be included. On the positive side, this is one of the reasons why I decided to be a department chair. When I was a student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I'll walk on the hallways and I'll see my professors that I want to look like or be like in the future. They were so angry. And they walk on the hallway, they go past each other and they won't greet each other. Boy, these people are so successful and they're not happy. What is going on? And but one of the things that I have tried to do to create that positive work environment, I believe strongly that a happy work environment is a productive work environment. So in order to create that positive work environment, I make sure junior faculty feel protected, that they're not going to get beat up on by senior faculty. And if they come to my office, they talk on issues, I'm willing to address those issues with senior faculty, and just make sure that the PT&E process is very transparent and clear on the expectations at all levels, so that people feel confident that if I get my job done, I will get evaluated positively or the right way. So those are some, I'm going to stop talking, but those are some things. Yeah.
Thank you. Chris, how about you?
Good afternoon, everybody. And also, again, thank you, Jess, for putting this panel together. I think the things that I would say are probably reiterating some of the things that have already been said. I think one of the first things to point out is that to create an inclusive, positive atmosphere, we have to be very intentional about it. It's not something that's going to happen on its own. We have to take the steps to move it forward. Part of that as a leader includes making sure that we're clear that we're trying to create a culture of excellence in every way at the university. Part of that culture of excellence is inclusion. You can't have excellence without inclusion. And, you know, I think that some of the other things I would say as we start off, things as a leader, making sure that you've got transparency, lack of inclusion, lack of good decision-making happens in a vacuum. So the more transparency you can have, the better off everybody's going to be. And then the last thing that I would add, kind of different perhaps, is part of being a leader when it comes to inclusion is making sure that the tough conversations are happening. Making sure that we are intentional, that we're not burying the tough situations under the rug, that we're welcoming those conversations that need to happen, even when we might prefer to avoid them or we might prefer to push them aside. And sometimes we're uncomfortable in recognizing what is causing that discomfort and pushing forward through it until we can be better off.
Thank you. Yeah. Last but not least, Christina.
Gosh, I think everything's been said. No, just kidding. Thank you, Jess, for inviting me and including me in this panel to start. I would mimic everything folks have said. I would say if I wanted to highlight a few things that have already been said, there's paying attention to what's going on in the department is incredibly important, and the dynamics and the things, you know, the unspoken aspects of people's behavior becomes really important to look at. I think that's what I would add to the listening side of things. I think it's really important to listen to the faculty and try to understand their challenges and struggles. The other thing is I would add to being transparent and honest is also being transparent and honest about my own limitations, especially since I've just been in this position for less than a year, and a lot of my learning is happening with them, and I'm really open, and I think it's really important to be open and engaged when I make mistakes and when I make missteps, and try to come back to those very quickly and, you know, manage and deal with them as well as I can. Otherwise, yeah, the same things, you know, clear expectations. I'm currently meeting with all the faculty now as we go through you know, the annual evaluations. And I feel like it's really important to actually have conversations with everybody beyond just what's on paper, to have an engaged way to understand the challenges and the struggles that folks are going through this past couple of years, honestly. So that's been some of the things I can add to this first question.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. The next question is for Angela. How can bias affect leadership?
Sure. So first of all, I think, bias can come into so many forms, and we all have biases. We all have these unconscious biases that come into play, whether we're realizing it or not. So not to put a lot of pressure on ourselves in realizing that we all have that. But in order to overcome those biases, we do need to recognize that, oh, I've maybe made a mistake here, or I've made an assumption about something that I shouldn't, to help overcome those biases. So, before we, I think, can solve them, we need to recognize the fact that we all have these biases. I think some examples I think about when bias can come into leadership is just those small things where we might treat somebody a little bit differently, or give an advantage or to an individual. Maybe it's an individual that we maybe have some commonalities with, or we get along with more. So we may look past certain things that we may not look past in others. It might be something simple like, well, this person is consistently late with assignments or coming into work, whereas we ignore that. So we ignore it with some individuals, but we are really criticizing it with others within the department. It can come in with situations of maybe only inviting certain individuals to maybe those informal type of meetings or situations, whether it's having coffee or walking meetings where we don't invite certain people, but invite the certain people we, again, maybe have those more commonalities with, or we get along with more. And so that's providing an advantage to those individuals, or it's providing additional information or resources to those individuals where we're not thinking about inviting others. And again, providing those resources. It could be things like utilizing titles for certain individuals, referring to somebody as doctor and not referring to others as that doctor when they've earned those titles just as much. It can be things like looking at policies or items or procedures within departments to consider everyone's potential needs. Things like having meetings at or not having meetings after 4:30 or 4:30 that might eliminate some individuals from being able to attend those meetings if they have to pick up children, for example. Having meetings or events on holidays that aren't those state observed holidays. So thinking about how we can make sure that we're including everybody for those events or meetings, and forgetting about some of those other things we might not think about as well. It can also be things like the language we use, and not just the verbal language, but the language we utilize in our emails, in policies, in handouts. Is that language inclusive to everybody? Is it gendered type of language? So thinking about how we're phrasing things in different situations, again, that's not just our verbal language as well, but what's written, and it's going out to send those messages out to everyone in the department. Those are just a few examples. Again, bias can come in a lot of different forms, and again, we all have them, but just recognizing the fact of, why am I kind of making this decision, or why am I making this comment? Is it based on some kind of fact, or is it based on maybe an assumption or my attitude towards this individual?
Yeah, and moving forward with that, conversation of bias, how can a leader combat bias in faculty evaluations and the PTE process, which I, hear a lot about from my department, and also my other colleagues across campus. And Chris, feel free to, talk about what you have done with that as well.
I didn't know if you wanted me to go first, Chris, and then I'll let you
go ahead, Angela, and I'll follow up from there.
Yeah, so some of it I kind of said it is in the end of my last answer, is that is looking at when we want to look at the facts when we're making those evaluation. Is this facts or is this assumption? before we get to that PT&E process, kind of checking yourself that you're not having those unwritten different standards for different individuals, or within the department or within the college, different employees, that we're not making those assumptions. We're basing it on fact and proof. Before we're getting to that PT&E, that actual evaluation process, making sure that we're communicating effectively. Again, not just, hey, look at the policy, but really having those conversations about what those expectations are. And we're making those expectations very clear. And then sticking to that as well. We're not kind of changing the bar for certain individuals.
Yeah, I think that the things that I would say to that, Jess, largely parallel the things that Angela has talked about as well. I think, starting from the standpoint of making sure that expectations are very clear up front, that the language that we have in our PT documents, we know exactly what it is that we're looking for, making sure that we're tying the things that we're seeing and saying directly to those expectations, that we have direct evidence for the things that we're talking about. One of the things that I do in my letters, for those of you who remember her, Wendy Reed, the former chair of biological sciences, had what I would consider to be a phenomenal template for annual review letters. And so I have looked at her template and modified it for the School of Education. And so one of the things that I do is I have a very structured template so that I know that the way that I'm approaching evaluation is consistent across individuals as best as possible. And so in that, it starts with, under teaching, here are what the expectations are. Here's a paragraph on that. Now here's a paragraph on what evidence supports that. And now here's a summary paragraph of, yes, expectations have been met, or no, they haven't. And it should be very clear to the reader because it's very much fact-based, directly showing evidence related to what the criteria were. I think that whether we're talking faculty evaluations, whether we're talking reference letters, anything related to that, making sure that we are, going back to what Angela said in the earlier question, that we are avoiding gendered language. Don't talk about things differently for men and women, for example. If it's relevant for one group of people, it's relevant for everybody. If it's not relevant for one group, then it's not relevant for everybody. And being consistent in the way that we're approaching things. As an administrator, also being reflective afterward, right? I come from an assessment background. Shout out to Jeff Boyer. I think you're on here somewhere. I come from an assessment background, so it's about closing the loop. So just as we start with thinking about what are the expectations and the guidelines we have, at the end of the process, think again about the expectations and guidelines that we have. And did those expectations work, or did they not? Were they not clear? Were they fuzzy? Do we need to add clarity? Do we need to add transparency to those areas? But same thing when you write those letters, reading through them afterwards as a collective group and figuring out, were you consistent in letters? Did you add language that wasn't consistent or shouldn't have been there, or those kinds of things, and reflecting backwards. Again, I think with all of this, it's about being very intentional and taking the time, slowing down, just like we talk about in search committee training, slowing down, don't rush through decisions, because that's when you're going to make mistakes and rely too heavily on the biases that you hope.
Well, that's a great segue, Chris. So let's stick with that and search committee. Yeah. So what are tools for diversifying new applicant pools?
Right. Okay, so you all get to listen to me again. With that, the place I start again is be intentional. I'm starting to sound like a broken record even to myself here. I think being intentional when it comes to applicant pools, part of it is recognizing that we can't hire individuals that didn't apply. It just can't be done, right? And I like that this question is about how do we diversify applicant pools as opposed to how do we diversify hires more broadly, because we have to start with our applicant pools. And some of the things that we think about and talk about is being clear in those things that we need and being broad and open-minded about what those things are. So making sure that our qualifications for positions are as open as they reasonably are able to be. One of the things, one of the books that I'm going to mention later has a statement in there talking about how every qualification that you provide automatically leaves somebody out. So don't add qualifications that you don't need, because you're probably going to narrow the pool automatically. And some qualifications, depending on what they are, may leave out an entire group of people based on access, based on other equity and other systemic issues that you may not even be aware of. And so, you know, starting with your position descriptions, making sure that you have as much flexibility to have qualifications that and experiences and backgrounds that you may not have even realized how well suited they may be for what you're looking for. So don't narrow things in ways that shouldn't be narrowed. I think, you know, we also talk about diversity statements within position descriptions. One of the things we started doing 4 or 5 years ago in the School of Education, we have a specific statement that we put in all of our position descriptions that is simply ability to diversify program area faculty in a way that prioritizes, values, and celebrates diversity in all forms and ensures a sense of belonging, respect, and inclusion that supports the success of each member of the community. That language is not, well, I was going to say it's not boilerplate language, except for us it is, it's in all of our position descriptions, but it's not generic language. It's language that sends a very clear message to candidates what we value. And we value diversity. We value diverse experiences. We value diverse academic backgrounds. I have multiple degrees in psychology, so I'm going to apologize in advance for this example for any psychology faculty members on here. But if we're hiring a faculty member in psychology, we value behaviorism, but we also value developmentalism. We also value other areas of psychology, right? We're not going to be closed-minded. We're not going to be very narrowly focused because we don't need to be, right? So adding language into position descriptions that makes it clear that we want a diversity of backgrounds, we want a diversity of experiences, of viewpoints, et cetera, because that's going to be what makes us all better together. I think we can also talk about marketing and recruitment. We talk a lot about this in search committee training, of course. Broadening how we market and we recruit. Don't just send things to higher ed jobs, but find ways to identify candidates that you might not otherwise reach. In education, we have the University Council for Education Administrators. They have a Jackson Scholars Program that are, it's a mentoring program specifically for underrepresented graduate students, those who want to become faculty members who are about to graduate. When we hire for educational leadership, we make sure that we're communicating with that group for the candidates who may be interested in our position, who are part of that program. But it doesn't just start at the day that you post a position either. We also have a faculty member who is a mentor through the UCEA Jackson Scholars Program, building those connections, building those relationships long before we've ever posted a position, because recruitment starts long before the position is created. And then even during search processes, making sure that you're sending the communication, the messages, that you're signaling to your candidates that you're going to support them and you're going to support all faculty regardless of their backgrounds and experiences. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do those kinds of things. But I've been talking for a while now, so.
We might come back to it. Thank you, Chris. All right, so we'll move on to kind of the mentorship side of inclusive leadership. So this is for Christina and William. What is a chair's role in making new faculty feel welcome?
I can go first if you want. You want me to go first?
Sure, William. Either way, I'm fine.
Okay. Right. So for me, once I became chair, one of the things I wanted to do was just listen to the faculty. When they come in, talk to them personally, one-on-one, understand their needs and their concerns. Because some people are very good researchers, some people are very good teachers, some of them are worried about their teaching, some of them are worried about their research. After I understand their needs, then I pair them up with appropriate mentors. I said, okay, every faculty in my department have 2 mentors. One that is going to push them towards teaching and making sure they have excellence in teaching. The other one that is going to probably push them towards research and grants and journal articles and all that stuff. So they collaborate with those mentors and make sure that they can get their job done. But another thing that we've put in place since I've been here is that we have a research seminar series. We had an alum who gave us money just to bring speakers to the department. So every semester we bring 1 speaker. And what I have done is to make sure that those speakers are selected by junior faculty. I ask junior faculty, you go and pick whoever in the country you want to work with so they can come to the department. They can give a seminar. We do pay them a little bit to come. And then you can collaborate them, whether it's on publication or grants. That way, you have mentors within the departments, and then you have mentors outside the department.
It's a great idea. Do you want me to go ahead and go then?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about comes probably more from my work as associate dean from a few years back, since this is a new role for me as being chair this year. I do see my main role as chair, though, to support an environment for faculty success. And what I focus on a lot in talking to new faculty are 2 things. One is, it's kind of a 2-pronged focus, I guess you could call it. One is really focused on cultural, interpersonal level of interactions, and then the other is a bureaucratic institutional knowledge building for the new faculty. So I spend, in the cultural interpersonal side of things, we do not as elaborate as what William described, but we do, I try to interact with the new faculty. We have welcome events. We're a fairly small department, so we don't necessarily use mentors, but we've developed a real collaborative group of faculty that support each other, and we always make sure that the newer faculty know we're there for them, for being there for support, whether it's research, teaching, other things that they're looking for. I do meet with the new faculty more often, trying to help them work through questions that they might have or issues that are coming up, similar to what William said, in terms of some struggle with the teaching end of things, some with the research side, and trying to find the appropriate places where needs are, resources and needs are necessary to fill in some of those gaps. But within that, I also see myself as the supporter of faculty, like the cheerleader, if you want to call that, and really that liaison between what they're doing and upper administration and back and forth, so they understand what's going on and can get a better sense of how the university functions. From the bureaucratic side, I do think it's important to spend a decent amount of time on the PTE document, so they know their expectations and what's going to come up for them. Talk about challenges along the tenure line, making sure they know where they can find policies and access policies that might be important to them as they continue to move forward, and get a better sense of the organization of the campus. Because I know when I came here, it was really confusing understanding how things fit together for me. So trying to work with faculty to understand that, to navigate the campus more effectively.
So you both touched on this a little bit, but what are common things that we forget when onboarding faculty?
Yeah, I can go again. Oh, Chris, if you want to go, Christina.
Oh, no, go ahead. You're good.
Okay, sorry. Let me just, one of the things is making them feel at home at NDSU. That's huge. When I came here as a junior faculty, I had 1 faculty who took me out to their lake cabin, took me out fishing, and our department chair back then had a policy where we can take faculty, our mentors, out for lunch, and the department will pay for it. they just wanted to create that, making sure they feel at home. And we follow similar policy today. I tell senior faculty, take your mentors out for lunch. I mean, that lunch is not just, it's huge. You know, you have somebody you can talk to, and you can share a meal with somebody. You can open up in ways that you don't open up when you are talking about academic things. So just making sure they feel at home. And there are so many different ways we do that in the department. We have 4 different occasions, social events that we have in the departments. One of them is the Christmas party or the end of year party. We have that event. Another one is the agribusiness banquet, where we recognize speakers around the state that do great work in agribusiness. And then the other one is we have a support staff appreciation event that faculty contribute a little bit and cook, kind of a potluck. So we have all those social events, and we make sure that faculty just feel at home, because those social events sometimes are even more important in building relationships than the academic events.
Yeah, much of mine will reiterate that too. I think sometimes with the onboarding, just from what I've watched over the time I've been here, which it's sad to, not sad, but I've been here 17 years. It doesn't quite feel like it, but I've watched how different folks come to campus based on so many things. It's, you know, when we talk about inclusion, there's just a lot of challenges I think folks can't experience when they first get here. And this is both for folks who are, you know, depending on race, gender, you know, issues of that nature, but I also find some challenges with folks coming from different types of universities. And so it takes some time to get used to NDSU and what NDSU is as a campus, because I think we all come in, at least as faculty, with an understanding of our grad programs, you know, culture of and institutional environment, and it can be really different than what you might get when you get here, like an Ivy League, as opposed to when you get here and see that maybe there aren't the resources you assumed would be here, and how do you problem solve to find the resources you need to keep your get your research going in a way that is effective for you. And so I find that is one area that we sometimes don't always think about, is kind of getting that cultural clash navigated. And when I see challenges some folks have had, it has a lot to do with their frustrations, and their aggravation with the campus has a lot to do with their expectations of what they thought they were coming to at NDSU, which goes back to some of other folks' reiteration that we need to be really clear about expectations and what is expected of faculty. The other side is, and I think William talked really well about specifics about this, but we can't overlook their personal lives. And I know that can lead to the biases, and there's lots of things we have to be really careful about. But once they're here, I mean, whether that person is partnered or single or children, you know, all of these different ways that a person can come to campus is going to have an impact on their experience here. And I don't think it's good to overlook the humanness of what people are bringing with them to the campus. And so those things have to be attended to as well. And so those would be my main things that I had talked about, both, and I would say both for NDSU and getting used to the Fargo Moorhead area. Just going back to my own experience here, I had, you know, it was really different moving here than where I had come from before. And so that took a long time for me to get used to. And I can see how going fishing and doing other things with a colleague can be really helpful in getting more acclimated to what North Dakota is, you know, and what they're going to be in store for in terms of student population, getting used to the kind of students we have and that type of thing.
Yeah, thank you. Something that we, or that I was thinking about with inclusive leadership when preparing for this was, you know, how to unify a team or groups of people. And I thought, you know, who better to speak about that than Margaret, because she has to, you know, unify people across colleges. So with that, academic leaders are often tasked with unifying disparate groups of people. What tools, Margaret, have you used to create a team among those you supervise?
That's a great question. And some of the things I will mention have already been said by others. You know, when William was talking about creating environments for people to just get to know each other and socialize with one another, I think those are very important. And we've probably done fewer of those during COVID than would be normally happening on campus, but coffees or lunches or just get-togethers where everyone is invited. I think that's a great way to do it. I think taking people fishing would be good too, and doing other things as well. So that helping people just get acquainted with each other, because I find it that the better we know each other, the easier it is to navigate difficult problems, and you've got a relationship, you've got some trust, and that's very important. I think listening is also really important, and I've seen the importance of that in our office, the provost's office, in a very broad-based way with the issues last year with the students and the student concerns that came forward. And I think everyone in our office spent a lot of time listening to students and hearing their perspectives and learning about their experiences. And then we've integrated some of those things into the system as well. For example, the Dean of Students, Casey Peterson, has started a student voice project where there's listening done with different groups of people, and that is shared out to campus. The conversations with colleagues that we started during the pandemic was a way, I think, for me and others on campus to learn about the experiences that people were dealing with during COVID. It was a way to educate, it was a way to communicate, it was a way to ask questions. And I think that helps us come together as a campus community. I'm really fortunate in that I work with great people in our office who lead a lot of efforts that are focused on inclusiveness. Angela mentioned some of the trainings that she's responsible for. Janan does so much in training leaders and faculty on campus. You know, most recently the unconscious bias efforts. Our fellows have been so engaged and bring a lot of ideas to the community as well. And so I think just being open to letting people lead is important too, and letting them excel in the areas that they're interested in. I think it's important to be honest and transparent, and to admit when you don't know something or when you've made a mistake, to create that environment where it's okay to be human, can unify people, and that we're all in this together, and none of us are perfect. And I think as administrators or as leaders looking for opportunities for growth for people, I think back to when I was a dean, I always tried to make professional development opportunities available, for example, to our department heads and our associate deans, so that they could continue to grow, and honestly look for those for myself as well. I think one of the things I maybe personally struggle with is to try to make sure that I recognized when someone might be feeling marginalized, or when someone may not feel included or was struggling with something. So I just trying to be aware and observant. Somebody said that at the beginning of the session, I think is really important. So some ideas.
Thank you. And for you again, Margaret, how do you convey to people that you're leading in a fair and impartial manner?
I hope I'm conveying that. I'm certainly trying to do that. And I think I will do the trainings and the professional development opportunities that we have on campus every chance I get. And I learn something in every session, even though I've been here for a very long time. I think that it's refreshing, and you build connections with other people. And I just think it's good to do that. I heard somebody mention earlier just to follow policy and follow our processes. We've put in place some really good structures to help us be more fair in promotion, tenure, and evaluation processes, to run searches as effectively as we can, so that thinking through that, okay, this is the way we're supposed to do it. Chris mentioned his template for writing the annual letters, and trying to be very conscious about those things, because it's easy to slip away from that kind of intentionality. I try to do a lot of self-reflection. I try not to make it beating myself up all the time, but self-reflection is good. I read. I tend not to read books cover to cover, but I have a stack on the bedside that I read when I have time and for what I think I need. So I'm kind of working my way through the blind spot book that we did for the unconscious bias workshop. And I'm really appreciating The Sum of Us by Heather McGee. It's been another very influential reading. And then I've got my stack of other leadership books that I find helpful at different times. I will talk things over with my team a lot. You know, I have Vice Provost Byland Green and Vice Provost Oster Alland, who are frequent sounding boards for me. We have other staff in our office who are great to just, what do you think about this, or how do you see this situation? And I believe they give honest feedback, and I try to give honest feedback as well. So it's good to have some of those checkpoints where you can say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Do you see it this way, or are you experiencing it this way? Yeah, so those are some of the ways.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so this is the last question, and it's for the full group, and then we'll open it up if anybody else who's attending has a question. So are there any resources, books, email lists, anything you recommend for those aiming to move forward or already in campus leadership positions regarding inclusive leadership? How about we shake it up and go, you know, backwards? So Christina.
I have a few books. This one is Brene Brown. Oh, it's all gonna be backwards for you all. Dare to Lead is a really great book, but I will say she has a podcast with, if you don't want to go through all the reading, that has some really great support in listening to people's challenges and things that made me, I've listened to them and they've helped me a lot with some of the challenges that I've had. Another one that's really good, I got this from Kat Westerman in communication, is Crucial Conversations, and it's about having really hard conversations, and I have found this one to be really useful for more challenging moments when you have to have harder conversations with your colleagues. The other two are sort of templates. Like there's The Essential Department Chair, which is a really useful book, kind of gives you a bunch of, you know, ways to go through, you know, topically you can look, and I found it very helpful resource book. And then Faculty Success Through Mentoring is another book that I use. It's a whole bunch of names on here, so I won't read them all to you, but I can, if anybody's interested, I can give you the references for all of those. So those are just a few I found really helpful.
Chris?
So I like all of the books that Christina mentioned, but the two that I will mention specifically, one of them, and now I can't read it because it's backwards, but Higher Education Administration for Social Justice and Equity. It's Adriana Kazar and Julie Posselt. It's actually designed as a higher ed admin textbook framed from a social justice lens. So it talks about personnel and hiring and budgeting and a number of different things. While I say it's a textbook, it's more accessible than it sounds like. So it's one I would recommend, but a slightly easier read that I've started recently is actually Abigail Stewart and Virginia Valian, who some of the early forward work was connected to, and it's just called An Inclusive Academy. And just, it's actually framed very similarly to how this panel has been framed. So it's kind of perfect for that. So I'll put links to both of those in the chat.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. William?
Yeah, so I have this, there's this book here for, it's for academic leaders, a practical guide for academic leaders. That's a book that I like. I have another set of books here that I use. But to be very honest with you, what I found very useful since I've been here, I've been to three leadership series, and one of them was Genuine Leadership. That was organized by NDSU. And that Genuine Leadership program, it had all kinds of really different topics. First, understanding your core values. It went through addressing emotion at work, clarifying performance expectations, giving recognition, developing others. It has a bunch of really useful topics, and they had little booklets for each of these topics. And I found that very useful. Then we had a Food Systems Leadership Institute training program. That was a 2-year program within the College of Ag that they send. It's an expensive program. I think the college paid about $15,000 for somebody to attend that program. But it was a 2-year program, and it was very helpful. So these leadership programs are super helpful. The books are good, but the leadership programs are practical. For me, for example, that leadership program that I went to, I learned about the 5 percentile problem. You know, the 5 percentile problem is something I never knew about, that any organization, 5% of the people will take 80% of your time. So 5% of the people will give you the biggest problem. So it made me a little comfortable when I encounter faculty and those who have the demanding a little bit. I said, okay, that's fine. And then we find ways to address those issues. But those leadership programs that I attended were very helpful in addition to the books.
Thank you. Angela.
Sure. So a couple books that I have, there's the one, it's How to Be an Inclusive Leader by Jennifer Brown. That one's a really good one. Margaret mentioned The Blind Spot. That is by Mazaharin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald. And then White Fragility is another great one, a great read that talks a lot about some unconscious, those unintended biases that we mentioned earlier. So those are a couple of the books that I would mention, as well as there's a podcast by Kim Wise that I would suggest has some good unintended biases and leadership type of information in there as well.
Thank you. And Margaret, you already mentioned some books. Do you have any more that you'd like to share?
A lot of my favorites have already been mentioned, but just a favorite that is a leadership book, not necessarily targeted at inclusion, is another Brene Brown book called The Gifts of Imperfection. Good, helpful.
Yeah, and thank you, panelists. We have a little bit of time. Does anybody have a question? You can share something in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute as well. Jessica, go ahead.
So I came in with a large group of faculty members, and we came in fall 2020. And so thinking about, we were kind of at the height of COVID when we came in. And so a lot of us have really we've had to create our own sense of belonging and feeling welcome with each other. And so I'm just thinking, now that hopefully COVID is wrapping up a little bit, what would you suggest, or any of you have suggestions of, to finally let us feel welcome among, the larger community and kind of build those relationships now? I mean, traditionally this would happen right away, like some of the ideas y'all mentioned, but for those of us who haven't had that experience, what might you suggest now?
So I did mention about the experience of having faculty mentors and all of that. But one of the ways that I really felt comfortable at NDSU also was when I came in, I was the advisor for 3 student clubs. So I was the advisor for Farmhouse Fraternity, which is not a club, but Farmhouse Fraternity, the Agribusiness Club. And I was the, myself and Walene, we started the Black Student Organization here at NDSU. So we were the pioneer advisor for those clubs. And I just wanted to understand students. I wanted to feel like not just teaching them in the classroom, but be with them, understand them. And that was super helpful. And then the meeting with faculty, the social events is also helpful. But I made it a conscious effort just to be advisor to student clubs, because I wanted to learn a lot about the background. And my farm guys, I still go there and have lunch with them sometimes. But I learned a lot from them than what I gave them. So, yeah.
I will say that in the provost's office, some of the things that we've made available in terms of training, where you've gotten a box lunch to take back to your office to eat by yourself during COVID if you wanted. Hopefully we'll be able to go back to, often we do those as luncheons in the ballroom to bring people together, and not only to hear the speaker, but just to see and talk to other people on campus and meet others in the community. I hope we're able to restore some of those kinds of things. Although I will say the charcuterie boxes were quite nice. And I think it's okay to speak up when you're feeling like you're not getting some of the support that you need, whether it's within your department or your college, or I try to do coffees with faculty periodically, again, more pre-COVID than during COVID, but to let somebody know that you're feeling disconnected or whatever the concern might be, because I don't know that any of us want anybody to feel unincluded or left out. So if you can find those people you trust to say that to, that's great. And I see Jill has her hand up, so I'll be quiet.
Yeah, go ahead, Jill.
I just wanted to give a plug for some work we're doing on the President's Council for Campus Wellbeing. I co-chair the community building committee of that. And so we are thinking of ideas about how can we rebuild our community kind of now that things are opening up a little bit. So we've got a campaign that we're working on that is a button campaign that, like, will signify that you work at NDSU, so you can see other people out in the community to know that you also work at NDSU. There will be some like walking with a buddy challenges coming up. You'll see some things in April and May about meeting points and getting out and walking around on campus. And we're working, doing some more exploring about other events that might be with athletics or fine arts or in the community that we can get people out of their offices or back to campus and seeing each other again. So that's just wanted to give a plug for our committee work, trying to work on this.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I think just looking at the time, I know some people have stuff coming up in the next hour. So if you have a question and that didn't get answered today, feel free. I'm just going to put my email in the chat. Feel free to send it to me and I'm happy to pass it along to the committee as well. And apart from that, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you panel for sharing your insight and expertise. I know I put it together, so I'm biased. Call back. Okay, but I did really enjoy it and learn from you. So thank you so much for sharing that today. And hopefully for the rest, we hope to see you at the next Academic Leader Series. Have a great Monday, everybody.
Yes. Thank you for organizing.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.